This sport and this business is just starting. Remember that business curve we all learned in college about high growth, maturity? All other sports are out of their growth period. Basketball, soccer, baseball, football. They're through their high growth period, but at just 25 to 30 years old, MMA is just starting. New entrants, high growth, that period. So I said, there is room for a new opportunity here because there won't be just one.
Welcome to the Navigating Sports Business podcast, where we uncover insights from the most prominent leaders in our industry. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Donn Davis, founder and chairman of the Professional Fighters League, the PFL. He's a venture capitalist, a board member 20 times over, and so much more that I'm really excited to get into this with you, Donn. So thank you for joining us.
Hey, Jack, great to be here.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's start with the PFL. You founded a league, not something people do too often. So what was the impetus? How did this even happen?
The idea came to me the day that UFC sold. I was minding my own business, running our venture capital firm, Revolution. And there were three things that hit me that day as I set everything aside, as you sometimes do when you get excited by something. And I said, 650 million MMA fans, third biggest fan base in the world. I had no idea. Thought it was a niche sport. It's really an emerging major sport. Second thing, underserved. There's only 50 UFC events at the time. Think of the number one sport, soccer, 4,000 soccer matches. Number two sport, basketball, 2,000 basketball games. So you're telling me those 650 million fans have 50 premium fights? Really underserved. And the last thing is, this sport and this business is just starting. Remember that business curve we all learned in college about high growth, maturity? All other sports are out of their growth period. Basketball, soccer, baseball, football. They're through their high growth period, but at just 25 to 30 years old, MMA is just starting. New entrants, high growth, that period. So I said, there is room for a new opportunity here because there won't be just one.
That's interesting. You know what? I appreciate you framing it that way. We had Chatri Sithuchong, the founder of One Championship, on the podcast maybe a year or two ago. And he shared a bunch of big numbers, huge numbers, and he was framing the One Championship versus, Formula One and to your point, the biggest events in sports. So help me get all this stuff right, because the true story, I don't even remember. So third most popular sport, how are we measuring that? Is that based, and then if you don't mind framing the PFL versus One Championship, just so, listeners can get a feel for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that's very interesting about MMA is it's not PFL versus UFC or any other company. It's not Coke versus Pepsi. Come back to that very, very underserved. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of fans, very few premium events. So whether you're a fan, a media partner, or a commercial sponsor, you either want more or you're locked out of the UFC or priced out. So it's not PFL versus UFC. Think of it as soccer. There's 9 major soccer leagues in the world. MLS in the United States is the smallest of the 9. Premier League is the largest. There's 7 in between. So it's not us versus them. Then the second point is to dimensionalize this for a minute. There's 2 big metrics in sports, whether it's the PFL in MMA or the NBA. One is athlete quality. 2 is called viewership. How many people on linear and streaming, watching on some form of TV, because that's the only way you get paid in sports. That's 60% of all revenue in all major sports leagues. So number one, athlete quality. There's one group that ranks all fighters in the world. It's called Fight Matrix. They're an independent agency. Of course, Don King would rank all his boxers the best. Dana would rank all his MMA. Right. I would rank all my fighters the best, but that's an independent third party. Of the top 300 fighters in the world at MMA, UFC has 2/3. PFL has 1/3, and One Championship has single digits, about 8 fighters. Okay. So we have about 85. UFC has about 200. So when you look at athlete quality, that's everything. Now, when you start to think about the other big 4, NFL, XFL, it's 100% 0. If you look at MLS, they have 1, Messi, of the top 300 soccer players. So what's very misunderstood about MMA is when you look at athlete quality, that's everything for the fan or the product. And that's where PFL and UFC, only 2 premium companies in the world. And then the second measure I mentioned is that real audience. How many people are watching on, quote, TV, linear streaming, regardless of device? UFC does about 8 million per event. PFL does about 2 million per event. Both those are global numbers. So we're about 25% of their viewership. And we don't have a lot of promotion. You get that UFC brand everywhere. You don't see that PFL promoted everywhere. So they're 33 years old. We're 7 years old. We're already 25% of the audience. One championship is about 5% of that.
A couple more things about the PFL, just so our listeners can understand it better. The end game here. We all saw that $1 billion television deal. Private equity money's been all over, right? UFC. So what's the end game here? You're not necessarily a lifer, so there's an exit coming, I take it, or does it roll up, or what happens here?
Yeah. All companies and all businesses have two phases. You build value and then you deliver value to your investors or shareholders. There's only two phases, right? And PFL is in the build value phase. And then we will get into the deliver value phase to our investors and shareholders. UFC's done that fantastic. They've gone from 4 billion value to 20 billion value. Think of that. And everybody said at 4 billion, Endeavor overpaid.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Endeavor overpaid. So this game is just starting in MMA in terms of value creation for, I believe, UFC and certainly for PFL. Our last round valued our company about 800 million. And some of the other metrics I talked about shows that we have the foundation and the product with our new leader, John Martin, to commercialize at a much more rapid scale. So I think you'll see us, and call it this next chapter, really start to build even more value.
I want to talk about a bunch of M&A, and I know you serve on so many boards. But before we move off of mixed martial arts here, we did a little work for Bellator way back in the day, and I know there's some, well, you could argue good or bad. We had a bad experience with them, but if you don't mind sharing, because I always think I know when I'm listening to people at a conference or something, I don't want to hear about all the perfect stuff. You've made a lot of money. Your life's gone incredibly well. It would be so fun to hear about something that didn't go perfect. I believe Bellator might be one of those, right?
Well, look, I could do a whole podcast with you on lessons learned.
Yeah.
I'm from age 25 to 62. Bellator is very interesting. And I've been pretty open about this. And, sometimes the MMA community is less forgiving about this. Bellator, we did for one reason, to acquire the fighter roster. Their business, candidly, had failed under Paramount. At one point, I believe it was successful many, many, many years ago. Audience was good, monetization was good, but their monetization and audience had really deteriorated under, call it, corporate ownership of Paramount. But their fighter roster was tremendous. Those fighter roster statistics I outlined earlier, they more than doubled those for us. So we acquired an unbelievable fighter roster with Bellator. That's the reason we did it. And to be transparent, we gave away 5% of stock of the company and no cash. So we acquired their entire business for very, very little. Now, what did not go well? We did some research, and it seemed like the Bellator brand was still strong. Our instincts were the PFL brand was the brand of the future, and the Bellator brand was a brand that was our instincts. But we looked at some data, and the data told us the Bellator brand maybe was still strong, particularly overseas. So we stayed with the Bellator brand and did not incorporate everything into PFL. I don't want to be right. I want to win. So we said, okay, that's what the data is telling us. No, our instincts were right. That data was wrong. The Bellator brand was weak, and it was a brand of the past. There was no commercial interest in it. There was very little fan interest in it. A lot of maybe MMA reporter interest, MMA Reddit interest, but not real interest. The PFL brand was way stronger. So we spent a year with the second brand out there. It resulted in some confusion in the market, both from fans and media. So I would call it strategy, check, execution, X.
Interesting. That's interesting. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but you have no regrets because there's essentially a duopoly on talent right now between.
That's right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's exactly where it ended up. If you rewind the clock to 3 years ago, there were 3 sixth graders on the playground arguing who was number 2. Bellator, PFL, and one championship. And that's over, when you look at the key metrics. And we did not pay a big price for that, but we did pay some momentum and some churn. And you never like that in a business. We had a lot of momentum and a lot of great reputation in the market. And I don't like that year of churn that we went through. And that's on us, and we learn from that.
All right. I like that attitude. And just for my own, edification and for folks listening too, right? Buying some of the equity versus cash from an investor's perspective, explain that for someone out there who's picturing their future exit or what have you.
Yeah, so we issued 5% of our stock and didn't have to give away cash. We don't have cash to give away.
Right.
We want to use our cash to grow our business. So we don't let cash go out of the business. We keep our expenses low. We don't pay dividends, right? We pay low salaries. So we didn't want to buy things for cash. We wanted to only use our stock to do that.
And existing investors were diluted and
Diluted.
shares.
Correct.
Okay. So
Just like when you raise new capital.
yeah, and again, I'm doing this because I'm kind of belaboring the point because I have this feeling like there's a real gap in knowledge on private equity transactions.
And later, I think you're going to talk about Team Liquid, and we can get into that because also what people are missing is maybe you invested low, but you also invested a lot of capital to grow it along the way. So your basis is much higher than everybody reads online.
Yeah, well, that's a good parallel for these investments we're seeing in private equity in so many sports teams, right? Where
Right.
it might be zero dividends, it might be capital calls, but exit at
That's right.
multiple of what you paid. But you have this illiquid asset, your money's locked in. Minority investors have virtually no voice or voting rights. Sometimes
Right.
the stadium when they want to come by. So let's use that example because boy, I lost my ass on some esports stuff. My wife's super risk averse. It's one of those things where it just takes 1 out of 10 losses to ever
Yeah.
super uncomfortable. Tell me your esports story, please. Please
Yeah.
come.
So I didn't even know what esports was. My young son at the time was 16, was playing League of Legends and wouldn't leave the game to come to dinner because he says, I can't let my teammates down. I can't walk out of the game. And I go, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then my partner, Revolution, Ted Leonsis, he was hearing the same thing from some of the young people who were working at the Wizards and the Capitals. And so together with Peter Guber, we bought Team Liquid for $10 million. We bought 70%. And the theory then was two things. One, it's almost like buying the NFL in the 1950s. You don't need to believe a lot in order to be okay. Our cost basis is so low at $10 million. And by the way, it was the number 4, number 5 team at the time. So number 1 team the last 3 years, but it was number 4, number 5 at the time. So it was not the Dallas Cowboys. It was, it was more like the San Diego Chargers. I hear something like that. It was a good franchise, but it was not a top tier franchise. But right now, it's more like the Packers meets the Cowboys in terms of where Team Liquid is. But number 2 is I wanted to learn. There was an emerging digital gaming space that for us, the investment was we have to get in the middle. Sometimes you can only learn many ways to either make money or save yourself from losing money by getting in the middle. You can't just study on the sidelines. Your learning is limited. Your relationships are limited. Your ability to connect the dots is limited unless you're in the middle and you actually can experience that. So to me, those are the 2 benefits of Team Liquid. I quickly saw something that fascinated me. They didn't really own anything. They don't own the intellectual property. It's owned by others. And so therefore, the 2 biggest revenue streams, if you own sports, are media rights and live. And live could be host fees, tickets, experiences, gate, all kind of stuff. There's no live and there's no media. Okay. So the ability to generate revenue in esports is very, very limited. The upside, therefore, is very, very limited. So when people are saying esports could be $1 or $2 billion franchises, I didn't see how you could ever get to 250 million of revenue. You just don't see it. There's not enough input. There's not enough revenue streams. So for us, it will be a great investment because the NFL in the 1950s, you can make you don't have to do a lot because you got it at the right time at the right price. But I only stayed on the board and only stayed interested for about a year because to me, it didn't have the scope and the scale that it could be very big.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, all right. Well, um, yeah. I mean, sadly, we even knew at the time, right, that it was the producer of the games that were making money, that were putting on the tournaments as well.
But you know what? But it's okay. In making 100 investment decisions in my career, it's very important to analyze the decision you made. Was it a good decision? Too many people analyze, did I make money or lose money? And therefore, if they made money, they thought it was a good decision. If they lost money, they thought it was a bad decision. You need to separate the outcome from the decision and the factors you took at the decision at the time. And if you do that, you'll make more winning decisions going forward. You could have made a good decision and lost money and a bad decision and made money. And if you repeat bad decisions over time, you're going to lose. If you repeat good decisions over time, you'll win. But that doesn't mean necessarily that individual one will produce for you. But the repetitive over time will.
Well, how about media? Again, I don't want to have to read your whole resume to everybody here, but you spent a lot of time in media, and we're talking like back to Tribune and when you worked at the Cubs, but the AOL thing, I think a lot of people in 1998 would look at AOL and say, well, it's going to be one of the winners. So what do you think? How this is going to all shake out? Like who's going to own who? I mean, we cannot have 15, 20 different people in the media in sports media business. So who's going to exist in 10 or 20 years and who's going to win and why?
Yeah, look, I love Tribune. I love Chicago. I was a general counsel for the Cubs. I had my front row seats. So it pained me to leave Chicago to go to AOL. And both Tribune Company and AOL were valued at $4 billion at the same time. So it's very interesting because to me, right now, there's two things that are very clear in sports. So they're not hiding, but who's going to act on them? One is sports, and then two is scale. So sports, 95 out of 100 of the top programs are live sports. And in chapter 1 of streaming, there was 10,000 scripted shows. 10,000 by Netflix, Amazon, Apple, Peacock, Hulu. So what is the next 1,000 scripted shows going to do in order to change your behavior and sub count? Nothing.
Yeah.
But what do they keep doing? Scripted shows.
Yeah.
Their budgets are still 80-20 scripted shows versus live sports. And Netflix still 95-5.
Mm-hmm.
So where is the next shift in streaming subs going to come from when live sports moves? So the next winners in live sports will be in streaming will be who gets live sports. Now, everybody says I don't need it. Of course you don't need it. Those businesses are doing great.
Yeah, they say they don't
But
need
do
it,
you-
and then they buy it, and then it completely changes their subscriber base, right? Like
Right.
every time they buy.
But it's over. So to me, when you take live sports from traditional, they're dead. So number one, the streamers' next chapter, called the next 10 years, the last 10 years were 10,000 scripted. The next 10 years will be live sports. And that will determine winners and losers in streaming. And when you go to traditional, they need scale because the streamers have 10 times the cash flow of the traditional companies. So the traditional companies don't have any money. So they all have to combine to get scale. Right now, there's 8 of them. There can only be 2, maybe 3. So because they need more cash flow in order to compete in the game I just talked about, whether it's programming on the scripted, whether it's sports rights. So to me, that's a very, very interesting game that will all be about aggressiveness and strategic forethought. And that game is all talked about, but really hasn't played out yet.
In our media work, we have this, introductory slides we take our clients through that kind of shows the, balance sheet of these tech players, to your point, their cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they could buy pretty much anything they want and when they want it. So is there a moment in which they buy some of the legacy players in the media world and why? Or do you think they just can beat them to death? Because I hear your consolidation, but even with the consolidation, are they going to get there? I mean, it's their core business. It's the one way they make money. There's all this pressure, right? I mean, they're cannibalizing their own business with streaming. So their margins, there's compression of margins, their valuations will suffer. And here's the tech world where this is just a sideshow, not even the core business. So you think they're going to actually survive, or will some of them be bought, and how, why?
Well, I think, first of all, the traditional people have to buy each other. They need to gang up first, right? Because that has to happen. And the streamers might be more smart to be much more surgical. Why buy everything when you don't need to buy everything? It might just be more headache. I went through AOL Time Warner merger. I know what headache is. I know what value destruction is. So what do I mean by more surgical? Just put more money into buying more IP. You want to own IP. So if I'm a streamer, how do I own sports IP, not just rent?
Mm.
They own all their programming IP. They don't
Are
rent
you
it.
foreshadowing
They own.
the PFL
Okay.
to a streamer?
Why weren't they a bigger bidder for WWE when it was up for sale? So to me, I would own IP, whether it's unscripted, whether it's scripted, whether it's sports. And the first two, that's their business model. The third one, you can't own the NBA. And owning a team in the NBA makes no sense because you don't control the schedule and the IP, or the players association to leverage it. So to me, back to your question about emerging sports leagues, you will see the streamers own those because they can make them huge and they can own the IP and leverage the IP on a global basis. So I think you're going to have to see the traditional people consolidate, and the streamers will be very smart and strategic in the aggressive M&A they do in sports.
All right. Okay. Interesting. Now we're going to mark this down and we're going to revisit and we hope to prove you true. Okay. Well, while we're making predictions, I have to push you a little further because I hear you say that and it makes me think of the stock market. And we haven't talked about AI. I know you have AI investments. So I would like to hear your thesis on why AI and tell me why it's not overvalued or if it is. And if you're willing to even talk about the market in general. In the private market, some of these giant, private equity exits, one of the places they have to go is the public market. But the earnings multiple is so good that usually looks good. And the earnings multiple right now is ridiculously high. So yeah, tell me from your expert point of view, AI, overvalued or undervalued, and share what you're willing about your own investments.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is I'm not a public market investor. I build private companies, and that's where my expertise is. So the only thing I do in a public market is, I buy some QQQ like everybody else. Do you know what I'm saying?
Good.
So
No
public
funds.
markets, I claim zero to negative expertise, right? In the private markets, I'll say one thing in general, and then I'll share a specific story. I've learned that the winners are worth more than you think. You rarely overpay for the winners, but you have to pick the winners.
Yeah, sure.
But you have to pick the winners. But when people talk about valuations, the valuation of the segment is probably too high, whether it's AI or whether it's the last hot segment. But the valuations of the will-be winners are not. So the key is picking the winners. My specific story, I was fortunate to work with Steve Case and Ted Leonsis. The three of us were the partners in Revolution Growth. And we invested in between 30 and 34 companies, over our 12 years. Yeah. We typically put in $30 or $40 million investments, pretty big investments.
Mm-hmm.
And we had several companies go to zero. It feels bad to lose $30 or $40 million. But we had an unbelievable record of 10 companies went to $1 billion and 5 went to $10 billion. That's wild. Like, I think it's almost unparalleled. And the company that I learned the most from was Tempest AI, which is the big healthcare AI company. We did the Series A. Eric Lukowski had built Groupon, and Ted Leonsis had been the chairman and instrumental to working with Eric. And Eric came to us at Revolution to say, I really value Ted Leonsis, and I'll let you invest in my Series A. None of us could understand what Eric was saying. We understood his strategy of using AI and big data to make cancer outcomes better. That we understood. The rest we didn't understand. And we listened for days and days. And then we hired the best diligence people at Johns Hopkins. And they wrote a 100-page diligence report telling us it'll never work. Funny. And so then we hired a second group. They said, Eric's all wrong. So all the data we got back, can't make this investment. And Ted Leonsis said, Eric Lukowski is a visionary, and we need to make this bet. And we made 15 times our money.
Over what time period, can I ask?
8 or 9 years.
Okay, excellent.
8 or 9 years. You cannot look backward. Nobody told Steve Jobs they needed an iPhone. You cannot look backward. I'm sure all that diligence by those experts was correct, but it was looking backward. It wasn't looking forward. And so you have to credit, and you have to support, and you have to be accretive to the energy of true entrepreneurs. That's where disproportionate value comes from, in any of these investments.
So I've got
Yeah.
some rapid fire questions to wrap things.
Yeah,
But
sure.
before I do, is there anything I can answer for you? Anything you think we missed?
Well, I think what's super interesting is the UFC Media Deal,
Mm,
that happened with
1.1
Paramount and
billion.
going on there. To me, that's the only thing that maybe we talk about for a minute.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you think? I think they bifurcated that versus what were they were selling. I'm trying to think about what they were selling at the same time. They went to market with that, and I mean, I knew it was a priority for major media players, right? Like people were holding back budget for it for all the reasons you described, global, et cetera. But weren't they going to package that with something else, and then they ultimately just did an a la carte deal?
Yeah, so interesting. They went with their pay-per-view,
Yeah.
call it their premium fights, their secondary fights, their contender series, their boxing, and Paramount bought it all. Everybody said it was going to be a split package, and Paramount bought it all, and nobody saw Paramount doing it. But to me, there's three things that are super interesting if you're a business and sport fan, which a lot of your people are. One, MMA is mainstream. Everybody said Fox overpaid 15 years ago. Then everybody said ESPN overpaid. Well, Fox was 150, ESPN was 300. This deal's 1.1 billion. So everybody talks about the NBA deal, but the biggest increase the last 12 years in 3 renewal cycles is UFC. Biggest percentage increase. Big deal.
Yeah.
So MMA is now mainstream. And those who are MMA fans go, duh, it always has been. No, no, no. When something crosses over from niche to mass and truly becomes mainstream, big deal. So it's now got to be in your sports portfolio because everybody who's 18 to 35, that's the MMA audience. And so if you're a streamer, very, very core to have MMA.
Mm.
Great news for PFL because there were 6 bidders for UFC and 5 didn't get
Yeah,
it.
5 still
And
out.
so for 7 years, there's no MMA on a premium basis other than PFL. So we were delighted because we had been saying to the market, we have a substitute product, but we don't have a substitute brand. I've been building companies long enough to know what's true and what's not true. Our product quality and our athlete quality is Coke and Pepsi. Our brand is not yet well known. So we need a media partner to truly get behind us and promote constantly and support. And we will close that gap and be a very, very big company. So to me now we have a market where there are 5 companies, maybe even more, but 5 bidders who didn't get MMA, who understands mainstream, who understands value that didn't before, because last time UFC went to market, there was one bidder. There's one bidder for UFC, ESPN. That's it. So you're seeing MMA go from off Broadway to Broadway, and that's going to be great for us. And their value is 25 million per event. Because when people hear 1.1 billion, they think of the NBA. Well, NBA has tonnage, so many games. That's 25 million every time you tune in on Saturday night. That's what UFC
Yeah,
gets.
only the
Well,
NFL would
PFL
be
gets
better on a per event basis, right? Yeah.
20. Yeah. Well, PFL gets 1 million per event,
Mm.
but we're 1/3 of the viewership. So we loved it. We're going to go to market, in the second quarter, and we're not going to get 1/3 of 25 million because we know our brand. Well, we're going to get more than a million. So we're going to get a good partner and a good price, and we're excited to talk to the partners.
Okay, rapid fire stuff, all right?
Sure.
Quick answers. Favorite place to travel?
This is going to be uncool answer. Home.
Oh.
My family are big travelers. They're big explorers. I'm not. Man, I love being at home. My 28-year-old son has been to more countries 25 than I have, and I'm 63.
Home is?
Great Falls, Virginia, about 15 miles from DC.
Okay. All right. Fair. I mean, you could stay there year round and that's fine. A life hack you use for health, wellness, productivity, anything like that?
Yeah, interesting. I would say priority. Too many people say I don't have time to get to it. I didn't have time to do it. Whether it's sleep 8 hours, whether it's workout, we all have time, but we only have time for our top 3 priorities. Identify your top 3. Get rid of the junk, and you have time to do it. And the more you really own and internalize that, the happier you're going to be, and the more you're going to get to the stuff that you really want to do.
What are those top 3 for you?
To me, I've always been very work-centric. I like achievement, I like accomplishment, I like impact. And you can't do that unless you're all in. So I'm work centric. And a lot of people say, that's not cool. I believe in life and balance. I've always been work centric. That's number one. And number two is my family. But I don't get to spend a lot of leisure time. I don't get a lot of friend time. I don't get a lot of golf time. I don't get a lot of movie time. I don't get a lot of party time. Those are gone. And number three is I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. I need that to really recharge and go intense because it's not just the hours, it's the intensity of the hours. It takes a lot out of you. So to me, those are my three. And I really work to focus on those three. But a lot of things got to go to the wayside that I'd like to do.
What PFL fighter would you least want to get in the the ring with?
And I'm going to give you the male and female fighter. It's easy. Francis Ngannou, hardest puncher ever. And if he was still at UFC, we wouldn't be hearing about anything else because he is the baddest man on the planet. He's also a wonderful person, but you don't want to mess with Francis Ngannou. And on the women's side is clearly Chris Cyborg. 20 years, 5 titles from 5 different companies, 1 loss, and she can beat you every which way. The smartest and toughest woman fighter ever. So Francis would just scare the crap out of me, right? And kill me immediately. But Chris would beat us every which way, no matter how many defenses we thought of and no matter how much tape we watched.
So you're not getting in the ring with her, I take it? No,
Neither.
Cyborg v. Davis? No? Okay, all right.
Neither.
I wouldn't either. Is there a hobby outside of that work, sleep, and family, by the way?
Yeah, I've always loved architecture and design.
Really?
I love it. My wife lets me keep messing around with our house. When I built exclusive resorts, I helped design the whole house experience, the residential 4 homes and the whole vacation experience. When Steve Case and I owned Miraval Wellness Spa, designed the spa and the villas there. So to me, architecture and design and how it impacts your mood, how it impacts a family being together, how it impacts your life, love it.
Those villas are beautiful. That's a annual trip
thank you,
for
man.
my wife and
Yeah, I didn't know you'd been there. So I just really, really love that. So whenever I have time, whenever work is, call it regular intense instead of super intense, that's what I do.
you cannot, no, present company excluded, you cannot tell me PFL favorite television show or movie.
No, favorite TV show of all time? Friday Night Lights.
Oh,
Clear eye, full heart.
oh,
Right? Yeah.
Lacey loves that.
Yeah. Taylor. Friday Night Lights would be TV show for sure. It has it all. In movie, Ferris Bueller. Who doesn't want to be Ferris? Who doesn't want to be Ferris?
I approve of these. I had an East Dillon t-shirt I used to wear about 10, 15 years ago. Every once in a while or something, it would get a shout out. Okay, we have a lot of students, a lot of sports business students that listen to this. Any advice for young people in sports?
Balance is overrated. From college to age 30, all you want to do is focus on your career. That's all you want to do. And if you want to find a spouse also, awesome goal.
Also, quite honest with that.
No, awesome goal. Very, very important. But other than those 2 things, you shouldn't be doing anything else. You have time for everything else later. And the foundation that will do for you, if you're all in, will make you so happy. It's not just about being successful. When you have a job you love, you're happy. And the best way to get a job you love is to have some success and really get somewhere. And so to me, you can do that only by being all in. So find the ability, find the focus, find the determination, find the grit to not say, I'm leaving for yoga at 5. I'm going to drinks with my friends on Wednesday. I can only work 40 hours. What about one day remote? That's all not going to make you happy long term.
Well, for those listening, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. My email is aj@nvgt.com, and you can find me on my LinkedIn page or the Navigate LinkedIn page. But again, this is AJ Maestas with Navigating Sports Business, and joined by Donn Davis today. Thank you for joining us, and I really appreciate your time. That was really insightful.
Absolutely.